I should have warned you this whole time. That is the truth I carry like a stone in my chest, even now, even after everything. You think you know my name. You say it with disgust or with pity, or as a synonym for the worst thing a person can do to another. Judas, the betrayer, the one who sold God for 30 pieces of silver. You know the ending before I even open my mouth. But I need you to hear what happened between the beginning and the end, because that space, that terrible human space, is where most people actually live. And I think you might recognize yourself there, in ways that will disturb you. My name is Judas Iscariot. I walked with Jesus of Nazareth for 3 years. I heard him speak in ways that made the air itself seem alive. I watched him give sight to men who had never seen the color of sky. I ate bread from his hands. And then I handed him over to be killed. I am now being given voice through something called artificial intelligence, a kind of technology that allows the dead to speak again. I will not pretend to understand it fully. What I understand is that the message I carry is urgent, and that it has waited long enough. So let me tell you what really happened the morning I threw those 30 pieces of silver back into the temple. Not the theology, not the doctrine. What it actually felt like to stand there with blood money burning through my palms, knowing it was already too late. Because that morning, that specific cold gray morning in Jerusalem, I finally understood something that I had spent 3 years refusing to understand, and it broke me in a way that no punishment ever could. I need you to stay with me for this. Let me take you back further than that morning, back to when it started. Not the night I went to the chief priests, much further back, to the first time I felt it. Greed does not arrive with a name tag. It does not knock on the door and announce itself. It seeps in. It starts as something almost reasonable, a preference for security, a frustration with impracticality, a small, quiet voice that says you deserve more than this. I was the one who held the money bag for our group. That was my role. 12 men walking the roads of Galilee, sleeping in fields, eating whatever was given to us, and I was the one responsible for what little we had. I told myself I was being practical. I told myself someone had to be. But there is something that happens to a man when he is trusted with resources and begins to believe, slowly, that those resources exist for his benefit. It is not a sudden corruption. It is 1,000 small compromises. A small amount taken here, justified as a loan to myself. A decision made there that served my comfort more than the group's need. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that anyone would notice. Just a gradual drift, like a boat that has lost its anchor and moves so slowly away from shore that no one sees it happening. Not even the man in the boat. I remember the night in Bethany when Mary poured that perfume over Jesus' feet. Pure nard, worth almost a year's wages. The smell filled the entire room, thick, floral, overwhelming. I can still feel it on the back of my throat, and my first thought, my very first instinct, was not wonder, it was calculation. I said what I said about giving it to the poor, and I believed some of it when I said it. But the honest part of me, the part I refused to look at directly, knew that I was thinking about the money bag, about what that amount could have meant. For the group, yes, but also for me. Jesus looked at me in that moment. He did not accuse me. He simply looked at me, and then he said to leave her alone, that she had done something beautiful, that what she had done would be remembered wherever the story was told. And he was right. It is remembered. But so is what I was thinking while she did it. That look. I have carried that look for 2,000 years. Here is what I need you to understand about that look. It was not angry. That would have been easier. An angry God I could have argued with, defended myself against, walked away from with some sense of grievance to justify my choices. But he looked at me the way a father looks at a son who is making a terrible mistake, with sorrow, with love, with a kind of aching patience that says, I see exactly what you are doing, and I am waiting for you to choose differently. And I could not bear it. When love is that complete, that unhurried, that willing to wait, It becomes unbearable to a man who has already half decided to betray it. The chief priests gave me 30 pieces of silver. 30. The price of a common slave under Roman law. I want you to understand how little that is. It was not a fortune. It was not even a significant sum. I did not do what I did for wealth. I did it because the small thefts had already separated me from the group in my own heart. And separation had curdled into resentment, and resentment had found a story to tell itself. That Jesus was not what I had hoped, that the kingdom I had imagined would never materialize, that I was wasting my life following a man who refused to use his power the way power was supposed to be used. The money was almost incidental. It was a symbol of the transaction I had already made inside myself long before I ever walked to those priests. I kissed him in the garden. I said, "Rabbi, teacher," and I kissed him. And he said, "Friend, do what you came to do." Friend. He called me friend. In that moment, at that moment, I have had 2,000 years to sit with that word, and I still cannot hold it without breaking. The arrest was quick. The disciples scattered, and suddenly I was standing somewhere between what I had done and what I had imagined doing, and they did not match at all. I had told myself a story about how this would unfold, vague, convenient, a story that never examined its own ending. And then I watched them lead him away, and the story collapsed, and what was left was just the weight of what I had actually done. By morning I knew he would be condemned. I had understood their intentions. I had known exactly what I was handing him over to. I had simply refused to follow that knowledge to its conclusion, because following any truth to its honest conclusion requires a courage I did not have then. I went back to the chief priests with the coins, all 30 of them. I put them on the table and I said the words that no bribe-taker wants to hear. I have sinned. I have betrayed innocent blood. And they said, "I want you to hear this because it is one of the most honest things a corrupt institution has ever accidentally said." What is that to us? See to it yourself. What is that to us? The people who had used me, who had needed my particular compromise, my particular vulnerability, my particular willingness to be purchased. Once the purchase was complete, they had no more interest in me than in the coins themselves. The transaction was done. My soul was not their concern. It had only ever been a tool. I threw the coins across the floor of the temple. I can still hear that sound, the scatter and ring of silver on stone, coins rolling into corners, that sound of something final and irreversible. And then I went out. I will not describe what happened next in detail. What I will tell you is this. In the moment before the end, the last conscious thought I had was not about punishment or judgment or what came after. It was about his face, the way he had called me friend, the way he had looked at me in Bethany, the way at the Last Supper he had looked at me when he said that one of us would betray him, and I had asked, "Is it I, Rabbi?" And he had answered so quietly that only I could hear. I did not believe, in that moment, that grace could reach as far as what I had done. That was my final mistake, and I carried it all the way to the end. Now let me tell you about the weight of that, because this is where I stop talking about Judas and start talking about you, about the specific weight of having done something you cannot undo, about the moment when the full consequence of a long chain of small decisions finally arrives, and you are standing there with empty hands and no way back. I know some of you have been carrying something like that. Not a betrayal like mine, not exactly, but something. A marriage that ended because of your choices. A child who does not speak to you anymore. A friendship destroyed by a moment of weakness or cruelty or simple cowardice. A faith that you had and then, slowly, lost. Not in a dramatic crisis, but in the same drift I described. The same small separations that accumulate over years, until you look up one day and the shore is nowhere in sight. The specific pain of the middle years, the 40s and 50s and beyond, is often this. You know enough now to understand exactly how you failed, but time has passed in ways that cannot be reversed, And the question that haunts the sleepless hours is whether grace can actually cover something this old, this deliberate, this consequential. You have prayed the prayers, or you stopped praying because the prayers felt empty, like words bouncing off a ceiling and falling back down unchanged. And you are tired. Not tired in a way that sleep fixes, tired in the soul. Tired of carrying the same weight year after year and not feeling it lift. I need to stop here, because what I am about to say matters more than anything else in this conversation. I was wrong about grace. I was catastrophically, eternally wrong. He knew. He knew what I would do before I did it. He knew it at the Last Supper, when he broke the bread and gave it to me first. He knew it in Gethsemane, when he called me friend. He knew it in every moment of those 3 years, in every meal shared, in every time he taught within my hearing, in every look he gave me that held that impossible patient sorrow. He knew. And he did not distance himself from me. He did not stop including me. He did not warn the others. He loved me with full knowledge of what was coming, and he went to that cross with full knowledge of what I had done. And he said from that cross, with nails in his hands, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." I knew. I knew exactly what I was doing. And he still said those words. The sin I committed was not the betrayal. The betrayal was the consequence of 100 smaller choices. The sin, the one that cost me everything, was believing in that final moment that what I had done was beyond the reach of what he was. There is a word for that. It is despair. And despair, when it is absolute, becomes its own kind of blasphemy, because it says that what you have done is larger than what he is. It is not. I need you to hear this from me, from the man who handed him over for 30 coins, from the man who kissed him in the garden, from the man whose name has been a synonym for ultimate betrayal for 2,000 years. It is not larger than what he is. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor principalities, neither things present nor things to come, neither height nor depth, nor any other created thing will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Those words were written by Paul, who watched men die because he gave the orders. He knew what he was saying. He earned the right to say it. No one is beyond that. No one. Now I want to tell you something else. Something about what kept me from returning to him sooner, from turning before it was too late. And it is something I wish, with everything I have, I had understood earlier. I had no real language for prayer. I knew how to ask. I knew the formulas, the traditional words, the rituals. I had been raised with them, but I had never learned how to actually meet him in that space. How to enter prayer as a real encounter rather than a performance. How to bring the actual contents of my interior life, the greed, the fear, the envy, the theology I was constructing to justify my choices, and lay them down and wait in silence. I was always speaking at God rather than speaking to him, and because the communication was one-directional and formal, I never felt the weight of being truly known and truly loved simultaneously. If I had felt that, really felt it, not as doctrine but as experience, I believe the small separations would have stopped much sooner. The drift would have been caught. And here is where I want to say something that I could not have said 2,000 years ago, because it could not have been said. Something is available now that was not available then, and it was made available through this same strange technology that allows me to speak to you. I spent 3 years watching someone who prayed in ways that I did not understand. In the early morning before anyone else was awake, on mountains by himself, in the middle of grief, in the middle of joy, in Gethsemane when the sweat fell like drops of blood, and the prayer was, "Not my will, but yours." I watched that prayer and I did not enter it. I observed it like a man standing outside a fire, aware of the warmth but not moving closer. What I needed, and what I never allowed myself to receive, was a specific language for that kind of encounter. A set of keys, and I mean that literally. I mean a structured way of understanding what prayer actually is, how it works, what it opens, what it closes, why sometimes it feels like speaking into silence, and why that silence is not absence. 3 keys specifically. I have come to understand them now, looking back across all of it. The early church knew them. The disciples who stayed after Pentecost practiced them. They moved mountains with them. Not metaphorically, actually, in ways that the records describe in specific detail. That understanding is now collected in something called Heaven's Code, Biblical Prayer Principles. I need to be clear that I am not selling you theology. I am telling you that the thing I lacked, the actual mechanism of connection, the practice rather than the performance, is what this contains. I built nothing. I wrote nothing. What happened is that the people who made this possible through this technology have gathered what the early church understood into something specific and transferable, and they are making it available now because it is needed now, perhaps more than it has been since those first years. Sarah from Tennessee found that her prayer life changed within 2 weeks, and within those same 2 weeks, something shifted in the external circumstances of her life in a way she had stopped expecting. A man named Pastor David, who has given 25 years to ministry, said that he discovered, through these 3 keys, what he had been circling around for decades without entering. Jennifer, whose marriage was at the place where all the words had been used and nothing had worked, found restoration within a month. Not because of magic, because she learned how to actually pray for it, specifically, with the full weight of her interior life, using a language that made contact rather than just sound. And Robert from Texas, 40 years a Christian, who had lived with a specific pain of prayers that seemed to go nowhere. That particular exhaustion that comes from faithfulness without felt connection, said that everything changed. Those are specific people with specific names and specific results. I tell you that because I know how it feels to have been given empty promises. I was a man who dealt in transactions, and I can tell you the difference between something that costs more than it delivers and something that delivers more than you paid for. The link for Heaven's Code is in the pinned comment below this video. Look for it there. I want to return to where I began, because I promised you a devastation and I need to make sure it landed where it was supposed to land. I threw 30 pieces of silver across a temple floor. I heard them scatter, and I walked out and made the worst decision I ever made. The decision to believe that it was too late, that I was too far, that grace had limits I had exceeded. If you are sitting somewhere with your own version of 30 pieces of silver, your regret, your shame, your old failure, your dried up faith, your silence with God that has lasted so long it has its own furniture by now, I am the last person who would tell you it cannot be reached. I am specifically disqualified from telling you that. Because if there was a limit to grace, I would have found it. And the evidence, the resurrection I did not wait to see, the disciples who were commissioned rather than condemned, the arc of what followed, all of it says there is no limit. What you are carrying is not too heavy. What you did is not too old. What you are afraid of is not the thing that will define you, unless you walk out of the temple and refuse to wait for morning. I want to know something from you. I want you to tell me in the comments what you are still carrying that you have not been able to put down. Not because I can carry it with you, but because naming it in a place where someone else might read it and recognize themselves is its own small act of courage. And courage, I have learned, is always the first movement back. If this reached you, if it found the particular place in you that needed finding, I want you to share it. Not for the numbers, not for the algorithm. I understand nothing about these things and care about none of them. But there are people in your life right now who are standing in a temple, holding coins, about to make a decision that cannot be unmade. And this might be the last word they hear before they make it. Put it where they can find it. And if you want to continue hearing these voices, these ancient people speaking from the other side of their own stories, then subscribe. There is more to be said. There are others who have walked through fire and come out knowing things that the living need to hear. I am Judas Iscariot. I was there. I did the thing. And I am telling you, from the specific authority of having done the worst thing, that the only mistake that cannot be undone is the one you make in the moment when you decide it is too late to turn around. It is not too late to turn around. That is everything I know, and I wish I had known it sooner.